Hello?
Still working?
Yeah.
Hello, Tom.
Hello. Hi, John.
Good to see you. Hello, Andrew.
Sorry, I'm a little bit late. We had a little emergency here.
No worries. You still made it in plenty of time. I hope everything's well.
Yeah, no, it was just a little something needed to be taken care of downstairs. Now I'm back in my office and all is well.
Oh, good. Glad to hear.
Good evening.
Is everyone else? Oh, hi, Supervisor Simeon. How are you?
I'm in your business. That's how I am. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. Do we have any other elected officials here today?
I don't see any so far.
This is Brian Johnson. I'm a trustee with Los Altos School District.
Oh, there you go.
How you doing? Welcome.
Nisa, the mayor is present.
Oh, how are you, Nisa?
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
All right. It looks like we're at 5:01 according to the atomic clock in my office. So we'll give it another minute and then we'll get started.
I believe we're waiting for Consuelo to join us. I'm not
Okay.
seeing her name yet.
Tom, this is Andrew. Good evening.
Hi,
Hi.
Andrew.
How are you?
Good. I am going to be stepping in for Consuelo for a large part of the answers, and on questions that I need her to chime in on, I'll be looking to her for some backup answering as well.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Hi,
Thanks, Andrew.
Supervisor Simidian.
Hi, Nisa. Thanks again for your participation.
No, I thought it went well. Thanks for doing it.
I did too. I think people really appreciate the sort of more granular level of access.
Right. The information they really need. Yeah.
And Tom, I see that we have Councilmember Jonathan Weinberg joining us as well.
Great. Hi, Councilmember Weinberg.
And Sally Meadows?
And Councilmember Sally Meadows,
Hi,
yes.
here as well. Okay. Hi, Councilmember Meadows.
Councilmember Meadows, I have to be the one that says you need to unmute.
Such an amateur error. Oh my goodness. You think I wasn't living on these things. I said I didn't dress up, so I may turn my camera off, but nice to be here.
Hey, it's COVID time. None of us are dressed up.
All
Hey,
are welcome.
at least none of us are a cat. So that's good. If you have not yet seen the viral cat video where the lawyer
The prosecutor. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
was a cat. Although my word of warning to you is do not have a glass of water in your mouth at the time. Yeah, that was my mistake.
So is that actually a real video? That really happened?
Yeah,
It did.
That
It did.
happened, yeah.
it was telling the judge, I'm really not a cat. So, so it was pretty funny. So,
Your case is not off to a good start when you have to open with that.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. Well, we're at almost 5 past at this point, so let's in the for everybody's time, and it looks like we've got 35 participants. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to our meeting on 333 Distel Circle. For those of you who I have not met, I'm Tom Myers. I'm the Executive Director at Community Services Agency, your local emergency assistance network provider. I've been asked to host this meeting, even though CSA is not a part of this process. We are advocates for affordable housing and advocates for the clients that we serve, but we have no no piece in this pie, so to speak, except to make sure that the community is well informed about it. And I also should let everybody know that I am myself a Los Altos resident. And so as a resident of Los Altos, someone who lives in South Los Altos in Toyon Farm, if you know where that is, I have a vested interest in all the civic happenings here in Los Altos. But my job today is just merely to moderate and to lead the discussion around this project. And I see we have our title slide up. Can we go to the agenda? Okay, we've already done introductions, and most of the elected officials have introduced themselves. Is there any other elected official who joined us late? Okay, if not, I'd also like to say that leading us on this discussion will be John Biggs, Community Development at the City of Los Altos, and from the County of Santa Clara, from the Office of Supportive Housing that CSA works very closely with. We've got Consuela Hernandez, who's the Director of the Office of Supportive Housing. And in fact, Consuela and I were on a very early morning meeting this morning together, making a presentation about homelessness in Santa Clara County together. But we've also got with us Andrew Barnes, who's the Senior Housing Development Officer for the county. And then, as we've said, we've introduced our elected officials, and then we'll have a site presentation with a schedule, and then we'll go to the public comments. If you would like to raise your hand, or if you would like to put your question in the chat, we can do either. You can do either of those things, and we'll try to get to everybody. We are scheduled to go until 6:30. We want to hear from anyone who has questions about this project, but we will try and stay within the time limits of 6:30. So without further ado, John, should I introduce you to go ahead and present from the City of Los Altos?
Yes, you did, Tom. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this. This is a part of the presentation that Consuelo usually handles, so I'm going to take it and give it my best shot here. In November of 2019, the Mid-Peninsula Open Space Authority declared the site at 330 Distel Avenue, Distel Circle, a surplus site, and offered the property for sale per the Surplus Land Act. The county intends to acquire the property by March of 2022. And the city and the county have entered into a memorandum of understanding, which was approved by our Los Altos City Council in October of 2020. And then in November of 2020, the MOU was considered by the county's Housing, Land Use, Environment, and Transportation Commission. And I understand that that was approved at that point. The county issued a request for offer to 12 pre-selected developers in December of 2020. And I understand that the county has received some offers. We don't have the specifics of that by this point, but we are hoping to work with the county and have a developer selected by the end of, rather than February, it would be March. Next slide, please. So wanted to share with everyone here this evening that where the location of 330 Distel Circle is at. It's on the northern end of Los Altos, near the community of Mountain View. Distel Circle intersects with both the El Camino Real and Distel Avenue. And you can see here on this overhead slide that it is the orange rectangular area surrounded by commercial uses. There's a lot of office uses. And semi-office uses in the area. There's one restaurant located there. And it is in a location that is very close to a lot of services for the residents of the facility. Next slide, please. This is a street view of the site, 330 Distel. You can see that it's currently improved with a one-story office building that is home to the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, along with all the vehicles that of the employees and the visitors to the district offices. Next slide, please. This is a zoning map from the city of Los Altos that gives you an idea of the zoning for the surrounding properties. There we have the site at 330 Distel indicated by the blue area, and around 330 Distel Circle, and as part of that block and the strip along the El Camino Real, it is a CT zoning district. The other zone districts that are in close proximity to the site are the OA zone district, which is an office zone district that does, by the way, not allow for residential uses. And there's that office district along Distel Circle and then across Distel Drive there to the right on the screen. We go to the next slide. Information about the site on Distel Circle. It's almost an acre of land at a little over 38,000 square feet. It's a relatively flat site, and as I mentioned earlier, it is improved with a one-story office building. It does have a commercial thoroughfare land use designation. That's the designation that we applied through our general plan, or land use element of the general plan. And it has a CT zoning designation. So the CT zoning designation permits a variety of commercial uses, in addition to residential uses through approval of a conditional use permit, which would be one of the group of permits that the city council will be considering as this project moves through the city's review process. As you just saw on the previous slide with the zoning map, the adjacent properties have either a CT zoning district designation or that office zoning district designation. The property is near a single family residential zone district. That was that yellow area. That is R1, but it does not back up directly to an R1 district or to R1 properties. We are expecting that there will be a need to consider some exceptions to our zoning regulations for this project in order to achieve the densities that are being considered and talked about right now. And right now the discussion is having a project that would have approximately 90 dwelling units in it. In order to get to those 90 dwelling units, especially when you look at the density designation for the property, which is 38 dwelling units per acre, you're probably wondering, how does a site with less than an acre, what is the approval process for a site that is less than an acre to get up to 90 units when the density regulations say that 38 dwelling acres or units per the acre are permitted? And that's where the density bonus ordinance and density bonus ordinance process come into play. Depending on the number of affordable units that are provided in a project, the city council has the discretion to grant additional density or additional units on a project site. And that's what we are expecting to take place with this particular project. In addition to that density bonus increase, we're also expecting that there will be some exceptions to our zoning regulations. One of the things that we have looked into a little bit has been the height limit, which happens to be 45 feet in the CT zone district. And in order to accommodate a project with approximately 90 units, we would suspect that one additional floor would be required, and that would take the height of a project in this area up to 56 feet, approximately 56 feet. So that's one of the exceptions that most likely will be part of the series of requests as this goes through the city's review process. One thing I wanted to point out this evening is that we are reaching out to the community early in the process, and we wanted to provide you with the information about the project site, the partnership between the city and the county. And this is all being done in advance of actually putting pencil to paper and having a design move forward for a critique or review. I think with other projects that we have taken through the review process, that has been sort of the method of getting information out to the community. So rather than having people react to a specific project, we first wanted to introduce this information about the site and the partnership, and hear your comments, your thoughts, your questions and concerns, so that we can make an attempt in partnership with the selected affordable housing developer to address those concerns early in the process, and arrive at a design so that when that design is taken out into the community again, we can point to the elements of the project that are really intended to address what we're hearing, not just this evening, but what we heard at the meeting that was the community meeting that was held on the 27th of January. And by the way, if you're interested in hearing, in addition to the presentation tonight, the presentation that was held back in January, there is a video that you can go online to the community development website for the city of Los Altos. If you look at development projects, multifamily, and then click on the 330 Distel Avenue project address, it will take you to a link, and you can look at the video from the previous meeting, and we will upload the video recording of this meeting as well to the website. So next slide. Andrew, did you want to?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Tom, and thank you to everyone for being on the call this evening. Andrew Barnes, County of Santa Clara, Office of Supportive Housing, and we are very excited to be partnering with the city on this opportunity. We have chunked out the project timeline across about 6 activity buckets. The first 3 that I'll talk about here as it relates to the project timeline, as John indicated, we're in the early engagement phase of the project. We had our first meeting on the 27th. This is our second community meeting. The content is the same across both meetings. At this community meeting, we are really interested in hearing the visions and goals from the community for the site, because this informs our discussions with our developer partner on this. In addition to that, we'll be doing some additional stakeholder listening sessions regarding the project. And John also stated that there is that project web page on the city website intended to be a place for updates on the project. So as we move from this initial community engagement, the early engagement phase, into the developer selections, you'll notice this says proposals due January 28th. This is the same slide deck we used back on the 27th. We have in fact received proposals related to the project from developers. The process is really a 3-step process. We're doing the review and scoring and interviews. That's going to take place this month. Generally speaking, we're moving into the developer negotiations next month, culminating in recommendations that go to the board for approval relative to the developer selection sometime in April. So we've moved from engagement to developer selection. Then after developer selection, we get into the project conceptual plans, and things start to get a little bit more real starting in July as it relates to the form of the project. We'll be looking at 3 things that tees off of. We've got our another community meeting number 3. After that, the Planning Commission, Los Altos Planning Commission study session, and then to be scheduled any additional community meetings. So that takes us through the conceptual plans, and really that's up until the 3rd quarter of this year. Next slide, please. Going into essentially the 3rd quarter, we're into the formal project application, the submittal and review of that. That's we have a target for having that be submitted by September of this year, and then from September bridging into next year, 2022, planning, building, and engineering review. After that happens, the next phase is the public hearings, and this is where not the study session that was earlier for Planning Commission, but a public hearing as it relates to the Planning Commission, and then elevation up to the Los Altos City Council approximately this time next year, February, March on the schedule of 2022. That takes us to the last bucket, which is the building permits and construction, and essentially it's the dates here call out for a May of 2022, you're filing for the building permit. Then interspersed with that is part of the tax credit application that's related to the financing of the project. Building permit issuance, if we track in July of next year, all funding bolted down, securing the funding in September of next year, everything culminating up to December of next year, December of 2022, commencement of construction. And those are our steps as we see it, as we walk through this process. Thank you. Tom, you're muted.
Sorry.
There
Great,
you are.
thank you. At least I'm not a cat. Okay. Andrew, thank you very much. I got a text from Consuelo and saying that you're going to be handling any of the questions that come up for the county. I assume that you know that. So we'll proceed. If we could go on then to some of the questions that we have, unless John, you have anything to add to the timeline that Andrew just presented.
Nothing more to add to the timeline, no.
Okay, great. All right, some of the discussion questions that came up that we thought might be questions you might want to have answered, we have already written out. So this may answer some of your questions. And once we get to the end of these, then we'll go ahead and start taking the questions from the general public. But question number one, how do I, a member of the public, give input to this process? John, do you want to handle that?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Tom. There are a number of ways where you will be able to provide input and be informed about the project. At this time, we are taking either addresses, phone numbers, email addresses from people that are interested in being informed and kept up to date about the next steps through this review process. And that gives us an opportunity to get back to you with those dates and times when the project will be considered again. Likewise, there's going to be, in relation to that, a lot of opportunities in the future where there will be public meetings on this project. I mentioned that we're going to have, or Andrew mentioned that we're going to have some additional community meetings on the project. If we know your name and number, we can certainly reach out to you and let you know when those are taking place. And you can always email us as well. We have a file of public comments, and some members of the public have started to share their thoughts and provide questions about the project to us, and we're keeping a track of those. Andrew, is there anything that the county is doing?
So as far as giving public input, there is the process that you outlined, John. There's the individuals, and you can provide, for instance, for yourself and Guido, contact information. I will say that from the county perspective, if you have questions as it relates to the county process or the project, my contact information will be in the FAQ for the project. Feel free to reach out related to questions regarding the project.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, and I see people are starting to populate the chat with questions. We'll get to those as soon as we go through these real quick. Who currently owns this site?
I can take that, John. That's the current owner is a Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. And as John had related earlier, going back to last year in November 2019, excuse me, the district designated their property, which is currently their office building that they utilize, as surplus. And through the Surplus Land Act, after that, the county went in and put the property under contract for a close in the future out at March 2022. So currently the property is still owned by the district. The county has a purchase and sale agreement which will culminate in a purchase of the property per the contract in March of 2025.
Great. So it is an office building right now.
It's currently an office building.
Right. Okay. What makes this a good site for housing? And there's a number of people that could probably talk to this. But Andrew, let's start with you from the Office of Office of Supportive Housing. What makes this a good site? And then John, maybe from the city's perspective, what makes this a good site?
Thanks, Tom. So we backed into the conversation of, or we look at the conversation of what makes this a good site really from two perspectives. One is if you take just a quantitative analysis of the site in terms of how it's going to score relative to some of the financing mechanisms. You take, for instance, the tax credits and how it scores in those criteria, and it does very well. Those are some of the quantitative pieces of it. On the qualitative side of it, when you think about the question, where would you like to live? This site checks those boxes from the standpoint of proximity. You've got proximity to services. You've got proximity to retail. You're on the El Camino Real commercial corridor. You've got proximity to healthcare and clinics. So for all those, and not to mention two cities that are in proximity to Mountain View and Los Altos. So from a standpoint of, is it easy to access, and are the people there going to have be able to get to the amenities that they need? From that perspective, irrespective of the site characteristics itself, which I suspect John will talk to, we like the site for those reasons.
Great. John, you want to speak from the city's point of view? And then I may actually have a couple of comments from the point of view of people who would potentially live there.
Yeah. Well, based on all the points that Andrew brought up, those are all extremely good reasons why this is a very good site for housing. The site is level. It's we know that there are services and utilities that are available to the site. That makes the development of the site a little less expensive than, let's say, developing raw land. It's, as Andrew mentioned, very close to a lot of services. There are bus routes up and down the El Camino Real that would be providing transit for some members that would be living in the housing complex. But I think another thing that makes this a very good site for housing is that it's become available. And I think with the leadership in recognizing the possibility and the opportunity to create affordable housing at this site, it's just a convergence of a lot of good things that have come together to allow people to partner, and the city and the county to partner, and be partnering with the affordable housing developer to realize an opportunity that does not come along all that often. And it's one of those cases where it starts off as an idea, and the next thing you know, you're handing keys over to folks that who are able to live in an area that they may not have been able to live in up until the point when this is developed.
And just speaking that, you know, from the folks who may end up living there, you mentioned buses, and that's really key. The VTA 22 and 522 run right up and down El Camino Real. You can get down Camino Real very easily to downtown Mountain View, or get over to San Antonio Road, get up to downtown Los Altos, which is great for providing labor pool for those two downtown areas. Easy access to services there at San Antonio Road, and actually not that far to get over to Caltrain, which is a good thing as well. So all good stuff. How will the developer be selected? You mentioned that the deadline passed and you've got some potential interest. How will this developer be selected? Could someone speak to that process?
I'd be happy to. Thanks, Tom. It's a competitive process where a developer submits a proposal in response to a solicitation, a request for offers. And if I take a step back to kind of give some context on this, the county over a year ago issued a request for a statement of qualifications to the affordable housing development community. So effectively the county said, okay, let's look at and let's talk to the affordable housing developers that are in the region that we can utilize on an ongoing basis for projects. So through this request for statement of qualifications, there was a competitive process of all the developers who applied to be part of a pre-qualified, pre-selected pool of developers. It was narrowed down to 12 for the tier 1. And when there is a project such as this, an individualized project like this Distel Circle project, an RFO, and I'm sorry for the acronyms, but yes, this is government. An RFO gets created, a request for offer, which lays out the contours for the project and gets put in front of the qualified pool, the pre-selected, pre-qualified developers, and they in turn, in a competitive basis, submit proposals. And some of the timing that I spoke to a little bit earlier is those proposals come in, we do the scoring. It is a panel of 4 staff, 2 from Los Altos and 2 from the county. There'll be a scoring mechanism. That scoring will go up to my supervisor, Consuelo Hernandez, the director of the Office of Supportive Housing. She'll look at the recommendation, and then it goes from there to administration within the county. Negotiations with the developer happen, and then it goes up to the Board of Supervisors for final approval for acceptance and selection of the developer. So it's a process that the good news is we've done a lot of the front end qualification in terms of who it is we want to be talking to and who can make proposals on this. And now we're jumping into the process of project-specific scoring of their proposals. And that all is anticipated to wind up around April, when it goes to the Board of Supervisors for approval.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So you mentioned that the Supervisor Simidian and his colleagues on the Board of Supervisors have approval from that end. But this leads right into that next question, which is how much control does the Los Altos City Council have over the process? And John, can you speak to what the council's process is to having input?
Be happy to, Tom. The City of Los Altos is going to be the lead agency on the project, which means that it is going to be considering and acting on all of the permits that are tied to the approval of the project. And at this point, we're envisioning that there will be environmental review for the project. There will be a need for a conditional use permit and design review application for the structure and the uses within the structure. Having said that, the City Council is the ultimate decision maker when it comes to those types of permits. We do take the project through a number of boards and commissions, such as the Complete Streets Commission, to get input on the circulation and the transportation alternatives that could be incorporated into the project. We also take it to our Planning Commission, who reviews these projects in depth and then makes a recommendation on that grouping of permits onto the City Council. And then the City Council members themselves take a look at that grouping of applications and then make the final call on those, including the density bonus request and the request for additional housing units and any exceptions to our site development standards that would be part of the project.
Great. All right, thank you. Will there be any zoning exceptions that'll be required?
We believe that there will be. At this stage, it's, we don't have a developer on board yet to start putting pencil to paper, but we have looked at some preliminary thoughts and ideas of what exceptions might be necessary. And I believe to get a project that would have 90 units in it, it wouldn't be out of the question to see the project come forward with a request for an exception to our height limitation, which in this zone district is 45 feet. Our density bonus regulations do allow what's called an incentive in order to incentivize the development of affordable housing. And one of the incentives is that exception to our height regulations, which is an 11-foot exception, which would bring the project to a height of 56 feet versus 45 feet. So that's about an additional story in the building than you'd realize if it were built to the 45-foot height standard, which means it would be about a 5-story building in the project. We would expect there would be some modulation in that, but no taller than a 5-story building.
Great. Now, on the timeline that Andrew laid out, he showed the construction beginning in December of 2022, which is less than 2 years away. So is that realistic? Is that an ideal timeline? Or do we think that we really can make that December 2022 time? And is that, I'm not sure if that goes to John or to Andrew or to both of you.
I'll leave that to John to talk to.
Well, we are marching forward on the schedule that Andrew went through earlier, and making sure and kind of keeping watch over the review process. We do believe that the construction timeline that has been laid out is achievable. I think that given what we know about construction and the permitting process and the process to develop the plans and construction drawings and complete the engineering on the project, that is a very reasonable timeline to be looking at.
And Tom, just
All
to
right.
add to that, we at the county will be in a support role to the city as they drive through the entitlements and the approval and the process. And we will, our role is to support them as they take the lead on getting it to that construction phase.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you. Where can, and Andrew, while you're there, this one would probably go to you. Where can we see other affordable housing developments? I know in the past there's been wonderful tours that have been available to affordable housing facilities and projects around the county. That's obviously not going to be happening during this time of COVID. Are there ways that people can see other affordable housing developments?
So thanks, Tom. Traditionally, there is time around the summertime where there's Affordable Housing Week, and there's the opportunity to have in-person tours of all the wonderful affordable housing developments. Obviously, this year, pandemic, it's not going to happen. What we are anticipating are virtual tours in lieu of that, where folks can have an experiential trip through the affordable housing developments to get a feel for them. And we're looking forward to that being a way to augment in these times what is normally a very visceral walkthrough on an individualized basis. And that's how you can figuratively see and touch it. We've also got at the Office of Supportive Housing, and I can put into the chat a link related to a map that calls out the affordable housing developments in Santa Clara County, and a user can go in and do a sort by a city, can do a sort by a supervisor district, can do a sort by a stage of development, pre-development, construction, completed, or do Measure A funds, not Measure A funds, and that gives a feel, and a user can go in and look at any particular area. So that is a helpful tool we found as well to give some information on where these developments are and what they look like and what's happening with them.
Great. And there are plenty right around, all around the North County area that people can take a look at. How much will this project cost? John, is that yours?
Well, I believe it's a little too early in the process to tell. A affordable housing developer hasn't been brought on board yet, and depending on the plans, the number of units that are developed, other amenities that become part of the project, that's really going to be the driver of the cost. I've been looking at some things lately that are showing that the cost for materials for construction is going up. I don't know that they'll be at the same amount by the time this development breaks ground, but that's certainly something that'll be a big part of the cost for this particular housing development. And those numbers and those costs fluctuate quite a bit. So we'll probably have a much better idea as we get closer or through the entitlement review process and are ready to actually start construction.
Great. But maybe we do have an idea of what percentage the city of Los Altos is going to pay, or do we still need to wait for that?
No, in approving the memorandum of understanding with the county of Santa Clara, the city council did agree to waive the in lieu fees for parks and circulation. And for a project of 90 units, that equates to about $4.6 million. And that would be a significant contribution towards the project cost by the city of Los Altos.
Great. Now, besides county money, city money, will there be any other funding sources for this?
There is going to be quite a few, and maybe Andrew, you can address that a little bit.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thanks, John. Thanks, Tom. So starting with the acquisition of the property, those funds were approved by the Board of Supervisors, and they come from the 2016 ballot initiative voter approved Measure A affordable housing bond. The proceeds from that go towards the acquisition. And I suspect also in the process, there will be Measure A funds related to construction permanent financing. There's also a mix in potentially of some home funds, in addition to some of the customary affordable housing financing mechanisms like tax credits and some conventional lenders associated with the project. So it becomes, as we call in the business, a capital stack, and you're layering in different types of financing. And it's, everything from the bottom up, from the city up through regional to state. And
Great. I like that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. I was going to see if anyone on my team wanted to chime in on the home funds, but I'll leave that.
I like that phrase though, capital stack. I've not heard that one before. All right. And we know how soon construction will begin according to the timeline and the previous time that we asked this question. So let's go to the chat box now. Oh, I'm sorry. No, okay. Let's go to the chat box now and let's start going right from the top to some of these questions. We've got here from Ann Paulson. Does AB 1763 mean that the project gets 3 extra stories of unlimited density? Is that how the 90 units come? Are these units for rent or for sale? And approximately rent sale price for low income, very low income, and moderate income, etc. So there's a few questions there.
Let me start with addressing the questions. This is going to be a rental project and not an ownership project. And in regards to the density of the site and the number of stories, the density is not unlimited. Our city council, when it is considering the density bonus for the site, has discretion to determine what that additional density should be. Likewise, the city of Los Altos has built into its density bonus regulations some incentives that encourage developers to stay within certain limits when it comes to requesting exceptions. I mentioned the 11 feet earlier, and that's one of those incentives that the city has said, if you can stay within that level of exception, we're going to look more favorably on the project than if you seek something that goes above and beyond that. In terms of the cost of the rental prices, I believe that's a little bit off in the future and is going to depend a little bit on the incomes at the time that these rental units are available or made available to the public. And Andrew, I don't know if you have any current rental values for those income categories that were brought up.
Well, let me just reinforce that it is early in the project and we don't know what the what the AMI levels, the area median income levels, the income levels are going to be yet for the project. That'll get developed as we go forward with the developer. So as the project starts to take shape, that's some of the information that working with the developer and working with their marketing plan, which they put together for the property in terms of the AMI levels, will start to take shape.
And just to let everybody know, what Andrew just referenced there, AMI levels, means area median income. And that's those categories are based on what percentage of the area median income. You've got extremely low income, very low income, and moderate income, and so on and so forth. So there's been no decisions as to what income levels might be targeted with this project yet. Is that correct?
Well, they're all the income levels are going to be looked at, and at the proportions of what income levels eventually end up is something that we're going to be deciding as we go along. But it starts from the extremely low all the way up through in the moderate income levels. You've got your great up to 30%, up to 50%, and up to 80%, and then within there, putting some percentages behind that is a little bit further down the road.
Yeah.
And if I can, hi everybody, Consuelo Hernandez. I just wanted to chime in a bit to say that as part of our memorandum of understanding with the city of Los Altos, there are some income targets that the city council has asked us through that MOU to look at. So that will be part of the discussion once the developer is selected. And if you are interested in understanding what the typical rent, say, would be for a household who earns 50% of the area median income for a household of one, at the lowest spectrum of the income, their rent would be $1,281. Just to give you an idea of the rent. And that's now, of course, HUD publishes annually the AMI levels and the imputed rent, or the rent that's associated with that income level. And in short, it's 30% of that amount. And we can type in the chat if folks are interested in how that is calculated and the methodology that the state uses to come up with that. We can add that to the chat.
Great. Thank you, Consuelo. We've got a couple of questions here around children, and I think a lot of that will probably depend on the population that is going to be going in there. If we do have families that are in there, families with children, do we know how many children we might expect, and do we know what school they might go to?
In terms of the number of children, I'm not quite exactly sure. I think it's going to depend a little bit on the mix of units and the bedrooms that those units will include. I'm sure there's some demographic factor that we can use to kind of give a rough idea of the children, but I don't know that anyone has really done that calculation at this point. In terms of schools, I can't say precisely which school these children that would be living in this complex would be going to, but we would be talking to the Los Altos School District to get that confirmed.
Right. The school districts, as we know, go across the city limit lines, and but I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe that is Los Altos School District on that side of El Camino there, that would be a part of.
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah. And then do we know for sure that it will be families that will be in there, or do we think that there might be seniors that are in there, or could it be a mix?
I understand that it will be a mix, given, and a little bit depends again on the mix of unit types that will be in the project, and that will kind of provide opportunities for a range of folks that would be wanting to live in the complex.
Great. Okay. Seeing that we've got quite a few more questions starting to come in, let's move through this pretty quickly. Let me see. I'm sorry that my screen keeps going down on me. What will be the process and set of priorities by which dwelling units, whether rented or owned condos, and we know that they will be rented, will be allocated to people, since it is likely that demand will exceed supply. In fact, it will be very likely that demand will exceed supply. As we know, trying to get our clients into affordable housing here at CSA. Consuela or Andrew, do you want to talk about the county's process for that?
Sure, I'll make it a quick one, Tom. In short, there's a marketing plan that's required for the property from the developer. And typically it will include targeted marketing to specific areas. And then there's a lottery that is held because we are required to follow the affirmative housing regulations. There is a marketing plan that's required by HUD through the tax credit allocation it is a public record, and we will be sharing that in future meetings.
Great, thank you. And then I will just tell you that, yeah, that is a big issue. We are hosting an affordable housing apply-a-thon here at CSA, and doing that today, tomorrow, and I think even into next week, if I'm not mistaken, where our staff are actually working remotely over virtually with folks who are to help them, assist them get into affordable housing and get through that. Our police and fire service is going to grow to address the increase in housing. Is parking going to overflow into Distel and Marriage? Is there an anticipated increase in the need for police and fire services, John?
Well, it's a little early at this stage to make that determination. What we do early in the process is engage our police department and fire department to see what types of services or needs or requirements they will want to see incorporated into the project. So it's part of the review that goes into the consideration of a project like this.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. We've already talked about how the rents are set. They're based on the income level of the person, and it's 30%, if I'm not mistaken. Did I answer that correctly?
That's correct, Tom.
All right, good. All right. Will there be recreation areas, indoor, outdoor, included within the development for the use of the residents and children, since the closest such facilities are at Egan? Recreation areas inside and outside the building?
That's a very good question. It was, we had a similar question at the meeting on the 27th. Our code does require some minimum outdoor recreational spaces, both common space and private space, and it depends on the number of units in the building, and it's sort of an averaging of the private common or the private open space amongst the total numbers of the units. But I think it's good to hear feedback like that early in the process, so that when we do sit down and talk about development of a project with the selected developer, that can be one of the key considerations they begin to plan for and begin to envision as they come up with the design for the project.
Yeah, very important point, and recreation is definitely needed, especially if you're going to have children there.
True.
Can you, John, while you're there, can you talk about the proposed park, the status of the park at 745 Distel?
Sure, Tom, glad to. We are working with the developer and for those that may not know, the developer of a 196 unit project at 5150 El Camino Real offered to develop a park at 745 Distel, and that was made a condition of approval. We are currently working with the developer to reach an agreement on a park with him in terms of the process through which the park will be developed and built, and all the things and components that go into what will make a public park and how that park would ultimately be transferred over to the city. So the developer is working closely, especially with our city attorney's office, on the details of that park agreement with us.
Great, thank you. Meg asks, can we ask what the cost of the 0.87 acres was or is? What is the cost that of this site?
I can take that, Tom. It is 10.4 million and it is a public record. We are happy to include the action from the board approval, either in the chat or as part of the FAQs. We're happy to share that. Again, it is a public record.
Great, thank you. Andrew already shared that affordable housing map, and for those of you who've not done that, I would highly recommend it. And if we ever get back to normal, post-COVID, if you ever have a chance to participate in Affordable Housing Week and actually take physical tours of properties, it's really educational and very helpful for people to understand. Okay, here's one from Peter Robertson. Will housing prices in the neighboring area go down? This will, I'm sorry, it looks like it got cut off. This will help to make more affordable housing. Will the housing prices go down in the neighboring area? I'm not sure if anyone, you need a market analysis for that.
That's correct, Tom.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone would. Yeah,
And
go
Tom,
ahead.
if I can chime in, there are studies around the impacts of affordable housing around neighborhoods. That website that Andrew shared, if you go to the original link, which is the Housing Toolkit, there are a number of articles and publications in there that talk about the impact of affordable housing, which there's no correlation found between that, but again, happy to share that with folks and maybe articulate more in the FAQs.
Great. Brian asks a good question here. Will there be priorities for applicants within the income bands, and will there be a lottery? And Consuelo, you talked a little bit about the centralized system that we work with through the county. Can you elaborate on his question?
Sure, we are required. Sure, thank you, Tom, and thank you for the great question, Brian Johnson. There's two factors to consider. One is related to, the city of Los Altos does have a below market rate program that includes some preferences for folks who live and work in the community. And what we need to do is be able to look at that policy and how it, how we would apply that to an affordable housing development coming to Los Altos from a fair housing perspective, and factor those elements in. Typically, it's achieved more through a targeted marketing. So say that there are specific employers in Los Altos that, the people that work there are within a certain income level. So we would target those folks, but there's no guarantee that they will get in. There's a window, an application window. It's like a pre-application. The developer will receive those applications within like a 2-week time frame. And then there is a lottery. And then from that lottery, each individual is given a number on a queue. And once their number comes up, then they go through the full application process. So, and that's different, Tom, than if we have a unit that's set aside as supportive housing. Last time when we met, there was somebody that made the really interesting recommendation that maybe we might house veterans at the site. And they go through a very different selection process, and there's exceptions that HUD has granted for certain populations that are not required to go through the lottery, for instance.
Right, great. Thank you. Good question, Brian. Janine asked you to type something into the chat, and I don't know what that was. And Consuelo, do you know what she's talking about?
Yes, it might be the way that the rents are imputed. I think that's.
Okay. Okay, if you could do like some sort of link or type in a quick answer to that, that would be great for Janine. A question here from Gary Hedden. Is there a target ratio for the units? Very low, low, moderate. This will help us understand the impact on the schools. Good question. Do we have a target ratio?
Not that I am aware of at this point. I think sitting down with the developers will help us sort of formalize what those ratios are going to be, but I wouldn't say that there is any target at this stage.
Great. Okay, thanks. And then Brian confirmed that, yes, it is the Los Altos School District. I figured it probably was.
Great.
Gary Heddenden asked, do people go on a wait list if they miss out with the lottery? Consuelo or Andrew? Do people go on if they miss the lottery, are they on a waiting list?
So the property will maintain a lottery only for the folks that applied within that application window. And they do not open the wait list until that list is exhausted.
Okay. And then okay, so then they go on to the wait list after that. Okay, great.
Correct. And then with the developer, once they exhaust the wait list, they will open another application window to take additional names.
Great. All right, thank you. We've got one here from Pierre Bedard. Okay, all I want now is my library. Well, that's not a question, that's a comment. The park is something that is very much needed, and I think you'll find a lot of fans of parks on this call, definitely. And thanks for the update, Don. That's great. Okay, Salim asks, this is an incredible project. What can Los Altos do to help the county build more projects like this in the future? Boy, that sounds like a question for Consuelo, but it also may be a question for Supervisor Smitty, who we know is on the line.
Thank you, Tom. I just do want to say that, the city of Los Altos, both from a council perspective and a staff perspective, have been amazing to work with. I think even having this platform at such an early stage is an example of how our partnership is really strong right now. And if we are able to find another parcel in the city once we get through this, we'd be happy to partner with the city on future sites as well.
And from the city's perspective, the county and the county supervisors have been great to work with as well. I think what you're experiencing tonight is a reflection of that really close working relationship.
Great. All right, and Salim, I think just making sure your voice is heard is probably as important as anything.
True. Very true.
Gary asks another question here. What is the geographic area that will apply or limits people getting into the lottery? Is there a geographic area, or do we know that yet?
We don't know that yet, Tom. It's too early. Once we have the developer on board and they start framing the marketing plan, then we'll know more.
Great. And Consuelo, you went and answered the question around how rents are figured, and thank you for that. And then a question here from Jennifer. She asks, how does someone sign up for the Los Altos BMR program?
Currently, we don't have a sign-up list. We do have a housing partner, Alta Housing, that is in the process of developing a sign-up list. Unfortunately, right now, the process is one by which when a unit becomes available, we notify the public about the availability of that unit, and then people apply. But we're looking at developing a revised process where a waiting list and pre-qualification can be done, so people know that as the affordable units become available, they would be in line to receive them as they move forward in the list.
Great. All right, thank you. We have another question here. Does the county own any other land in the city of Los Altos? And I would add something to that. Does the county own any other land in the city of Los Altos, and are there any other plans in the future that you're at liberty to talk about? Consuelo?
Thanks, Tom. And unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that because the county does own, some open space areas in the area, and there might be some roads properties or other governmental purpose properties that I might not be aware of. I don't have a list in front of me, but from an affordable housing perspective, this is the only site. And I don't have another site on my list. But if somebody has a site that they are aware of, and there's interest, of course, you can always send that our way.
Great, thank you. Freddie provides us with a comment here. He says, this early community outreach to the residents of Los Altos is very much appreciated. Please make this standard operating procedure for the city. So that's
Noted.
terrific. They're coming in hot and heavy, and they're kind of going through. Okay, Gary asks, is this a supportive housing project?
We do not know that yet, Tom.
Yep. Okay. And then Jeannie provides a link for Alta Housing and resources through Alta Housing there. Maya, I've lived my whole life in Los Altos, about a 3-minute walk from this property, and I think this project is a great idea and in a great location. At what stage in the process will the city council be asked to approve the zoning exceptions? And then I'll go on with the rest of her comment after someone can answer that. Do we know what stage zoning exceptions will be asked, John?
Yeah, I believe on the timeline that Andrew went over earlier, and I don't have the exact date in front of me, but it will be this year as we go through the process. I'm recalling, but it will be certainly before the construction documents are developed and they submit for a building permit application. It's going to be very early in the process because we want to make sure that we have an approved project before we move forward with doing all of the other work that needs to be done to realize the development.
Great. And then further, she says, is there a risk that the project could get stalled at the council level if there's denying these exceptions and applications, given that our council has denied applications for exceptions in the past? Or can we hope that the council is more likely to approve exceptions for this project since the city is working closely on the development? I think that's asking for speculation, so you may not be able to go there, John. But there is a risk that asking for exceptions, things could get stalled. That's part of the process.
Well, but to counter that, I guess there's always that risk. But our city council has always been willing to work with applicants, and they don't deny a project outright. They have concerns or things that they would like to see changed or modified. They relay that to the applicant, and they ask that the applicant go back and consider those modifications and then return with a project that addresses any concerns, any suggestions for change. And that has allowed projects to continue moving forward to a point where the council is able to grant the approval. So it's a really good working council that does make a very concerted effort to realize these projects through to fruition.
Great. And that kind of answers the next question that's written there about if they were to get denied, what would be the next steps? And it sounds like there's some back and forth discussion and negotiation. Exactly. Great. And then we've got another question from Pierre. Have you considered mixed use? And this goes back to his library question. A place to study can be the secret to success. As the chair of the Library Commission, I am biased, but have you considered this, especially since this is a county city endeavor? Mixed use.
That has not been part of our discussions. I believe the effort has been to maximize the number of affordable units that we could have constructed in Los Altos, and that has really led the discussions amongst the county and the city.
Great.
And if I can add,
Sure.
Tom, it's a balance between priorities and considering the parking impacts. So when you have mixed use, you have to factor in the parking for the rental side and the parking for like a library. And so we would have to consider all of those impacts as we start working on the design with the developer.
Good point.
Great. Thank you. Will racial diversity criteria be incorporated into the market targets?
That is part of the marketing strategy in terms of making sure that there's no discrimination within the marketing strategy or the rental process.
Great. Thank you. And then Gary asked, what happens if a tenant cannot pay the rent?
That's a two-part question. The one is, every tenant does have a rental lease, and like any other apartment, if folks don't pay their rent, then they risk losing their apartment. However, because this is a county and city partnership, I would hope that the households that may face some challenges because of loss of income, we have an entire homelessness prevention system that could step in and assist.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and I can answer that one myself. Because of the location of this property, one would assume and hope that the manager on the property would immediately send that person to Community Services Agency. Over here, we do rent checks daily, rental assistance checks on a daily basis. And in fact, during this COVID time, we've actually just this week surpassed $4 million in rent relief aid out into the community. Yeah, I get them to, this is for everybody. If you know someone who's having trouble, get them over to CSA right away. Sorry, little commercial there. Okay. And then Patrick says, yes, please maximize the living units. And that's a good comment. Please maximize those the living units. Then Gary asks another question. Talk about parking some more. This is always important. John, do you have comments on the parking? I know it's so early in the process. Gary is right, though. This always comes up as a concern for folks.
It is early in the process, and there are a couple of avenues that the developer can take when it comes to parking. There are some parking requirements that are permitted through our density bonus application, but the developer could also request some exceptions to our parking standards. And it'll just be taking a look at the site and the number of units, and I think cost is going to factor in. The deeper you go down into the earth to provide lower levels of parking, the more expensive that becomes. So it becomes a balance between cost of providing a lot of parking versus actually providing for the units. The other, I think, factor that we need to consider is that this is very near the El Camino Real, and there's bus service and a transit station at Showers Avenue, I believe. So there are other modes of transportation is available, but it's all going to be something that gets considered through the development of the plans and the review process.
Great, thank you, John. Janine wants to clarify her question here, and thank you for doing that, Janine. I would understand that discrimination would not be allowed. But my question has to do with amplifying the need to increase racial diversity in Los Altos, particularly amongst Black and the Latinx community. And I'll just add a little comment here myself that the most racially diverse communities are, in my opinion, the healthiest communities. And so thank you for asking that question, Janine. Are there ways that we can amplify the need to increase racial diversity and make sure that this housing development is seen as being welcoming to a racially diverse population?
Thank you, Janine, for clarifying that. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that from your original question. And I don't have a great answer for you. And, we haven't actually ever been asked that question, and it's tough to, balance that with what's required and what we need to do and work with the developer to make sure that they provide. I will share with you that as part of the county's 2020-2025 community plan to end homelessness, built into that is an overarching theme that addresses race and equity. And part of that includes raising the voices of folks with lived experience and looking at different land use practices that continue to perpetuate these very segregated communities. So I think there is a space for that conversation. And I don't have a perfect answer for you, but always happy and willing to figure out how to raise that as an issue when we select our developer.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Janine, and thank you, Consuelo, for that. Does the city have a plan for disasters like earthquake and fire? There is a lot of high-density housing in this area, especially at 5150 El Camino Real and across El Camino Real in Mountain View. And that's actually a really good question for all of us in North County when so many of our emergency responders live outside of the communities that they serve in. Does the city have plan for disasters? And I think this goes back to the question around needing to plan around police and fire. John?
Yes, the city has a very robust plan for addressing disasters in the unfortunate event that they take place. In fact, we get together a couple times a year to practice and prepare for those types of events, and so we are ready to pull the team together and address them, and make sure that we can assist the community through those situations if unfortunately they do take place. And we also maintain a list of properties that, such as this one, that are higher density and know that we would, could even request emergency aid from other agencies if we needed to go out and help those the residents of those properties.
And I know that it's actually quite common for there to be mutual aid between Mountain View and Los Altos.
Correct.
That is quite frequent. And then if for those, I'm going to do another quick commercial here. For those of you that don't know, the city of Los Altos and a woman named Ann Heppenstall and the Los Altos Community Foundation maintain a very robust emergency response system. I know this very well because my husband is very much involved in that in our neighborhood. And he's a BAT and I don't know, whatever, all these other initials but they get very involved in making sure that the community is very, very much prepared for disasters. And if you are not a part of that system, I'm sure that you could get very much involved in it by a quick call to City Hall or a quick email to Ann Heppenstall at City Hall to find out more about that emergency preparedness program. Gary asked another question here. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something on that, John?
No, I was just saying that's a great plug for Ann Heppenstall and all the work that she does. Thank you.
Yeah. So give her lots of phone calls tomorrow and tell her Tom sent you. Okay, Gary asked another question. Will EV chargers be part of the parking package?
They will. Our city council last year in 2020 did approve what we call the REACH codes. And as a component of those new regulations, there is a requirement that a certain percentage of the parking spaces be ready for EV charging.
Great, thank you. And Patrick looks like he's provided a comment here. The good news about giving AMI levels and good marketing to local employers. We will naturally lean towards a diverse population. Well, we hope that no matter what is taken, we hope that we will reach a diverse population. Gary also asks here, will the building be all electric?
Another component of the REACH codes that our city council adopted last year was a requirement that all new buildings be all electric. So this building will need to comply with that. And I'm happy to say that the state of California Energy Commission just approved our ordinances and our regulations requiring all electric buildings.
Great. And then Supervisor Smitty said thanks to everybody, and he appreciates the feedback and he appreciates the engagement. And I'm actually, between this meeting and the last meeting as a Los Altos resident, very proud of the engagement people have had on this project. So that's fantastic. Meg provides a comment. Best to you all as you proceed. This is a great project. Celine, Consuelo, could the mandatory marketing be targeted at racially diverse audiences, perhaps multilingual ads or more ads targeted in zip codes that historically were redlined? And if you don't know the history of redlining in the Mountain View, Los Altos, Palo Alto area, there is a very interesting history, and I believe several of the historical associations around. I know Mountain View has some information on that, but it's interesting to read and can help to understand where we've been and where we need to go. But could the city put a mandatory "you must market to this group or that group," Consuela?
Hi, Tom. I think we should take this question, once we have the developer on board. It's really more appropriate for them. They have very engaged property management staff, and there's a lot that goes into the marketing plan and strategy. So I think it would be great to take these comments, and one of the reasons why we're hosting these early engagements is to really understand from the community what are some of the opportunities like this in terms of marketing, addressing the racial diversity in Los Altos that we can take back to the developer.
Great. All right. Well, guys, it looks like we've come to the end of our questions, and it looks like we're done actually a little bit early. So congratulations to everybody. Like I said, as a Los Altos resident, I'm very pleased to see the engagement on this. So thank you all to everybody. If you have questions of the county, you can get in touch with the folks at the county that are on this call. If you have questions of the city, go to John Biggs. And if you have questions, do not contact CSA. We have no skin in this game. So I will actually pass your question on to someone else. But thank you very much for all of you for joining. Affordable housing is very much an issue, and we want to make sure that you all are kept informed on this, very much so. So thank you all very much, and we'll say good night.
Tom, I just want to say thank you, Tom, for facilitating the discussions here. It's been a pleasure working with you and the county on answering and addressing all the questions that we've received. And we hope that we've got a lot of information out to the public. We've heard a lot of things, and that'll help us carry forward with a successful project.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Can I chime in? Because Mayor Flagger had to leave early, and so she wanted me to thank everybody as well. So we can, John and Guido, Los Altos, and Andrew and Consuelo from the county, thank you so much. We've had a very active community volunteer in Sue Russell, who I know has worked with you, and Tom, thank you for doing both of these, and all of our community attendees. So this is an exciting project, and hopefully will actually be the poster child of making this kind of project work. So thanks for all of your efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.